Hey everyone, how's it going today? My smooth transition there coming out of that blues guitar stuff there. So thanks for everyone for being here as usual. I totally appreciate it. Just getting my settings all correct here. And all right, everything's good. All right, so today, thanks once again, thanks so much for being here. Today I'm going to talk about some of the topics I'm going to cover in my upcoming live masterclass coming up this Sunday, September 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Zoom. You can sign up at Jam Guitar Lessons, BVs, the super BVs here, putting out all the links. And of course, if you don't get to see that live, you can always get it on the replay over at Jam Guitar Lessons using the link for 25% off. But a lot of people ask me, well, what do you cover in some of these master classes? And a lot of you guys take the master classes, and I appreciate that. So I want to talk a little bit about what I'm going to talk about and just give you an example of some of the most important things I think that you can think about when you're playing over a blues, but pretty much anything and everything, really. It's not just a blues. But we're going to talk about dominant seventh chords. So as you may or may not know, a blues is made up of 3 dominant 7 chords. If we're talking about the key of G, the first chord, the 1 chord, would be a G7 chord, right? So what's most important when you're playing over a blues is to know how to handle playing over a dominant 7th chord. Right? So there's a lot of things we can do, and there's one super simple tweak that we can do as we do this. So I just set up a little loop here. Loops are great. So this is a G7 band. I'll show you this in a sec. Right? Now here, hopefully that loop's all right. Here's a G7, or a G minor pentatonic. Okay, so I'm playing G7, right? I'm just playing G minor pentatonic. So my little groove there, I see I made some distinct guitar faces there. Right? There we go, here. So I'm playing G7. I gotta stop looking at the chat. I always look at the chat. I'm gonna look at me, then I'll come back to the chat. Okay, so I'm playing this G7 chord, this G7 vamp. I'm thinking just my regular old G7 right here. And the little move I'm doing, I have my thumb on the bottom playing G. I'm barring with my first finger on the D, G, and B string, so my notes are F, B flat, and D. G7 is spelled G, B, D, F. So it's going to hammer on that B flat to the B. So it's like really quick. So you're not really hearing the B flat. It's just an ornamentation on the B. With ornamentation from the B flat to the B. So you're really hearing the B, but you're hearing that move, that flat 3, the natural 3. I'm just kind of barring right here, playing the G, C, and E. So basically I have G7, sort of like a C major triad. I don't really hear it as a C major triad. I kind of just hear it just as a thing that sounds good within the key of G Mixolydian, which is the G7 chord. So I'm not hearing... I don't really hear that. Depends on how you want to look at it. Whatever. I hear it that way. So the first thing I'm thinking about is, well, one thing that happens a lot when I do workshops and master classes is that people want to learn the really, really advanced stuff. I want to learn how to play the diminished scale or super Locrian and how I can do all these sorts of things over a dominant 7th chord. And that's all super cool and awesome, and I love teaching that stuff and talking about it and playing that. But the vast majority of the stuff I play It's sort of pentatonic based. And this goes for pretty much anybody I know who plays blues, whether it's Robin Ford, he still thinks primarily as a pentatonic player in his mind. John Scofield, lots of pentatonic stuff. Then the straight pentatonic players, largely like Albert King, Stevie Ray Vaughan, who are primarily pentatonic players. Nobody jump out, hey, Stevie did this. I'm just making a generalization. It's the internet and everybody gets crazy if you misspeak. Gotcha. You said he didn't. So the first thing, and I've talked about this before many, many times because it's super important, and that is the idea of tweaking your flat 3. So what's going on there is I have a G7 chord. But if we play a B flat, which is the flat third of my scale, G minor pentatonic is G, B flat, C, D, F, G, B flat. So if I play that B flat unadulterated over G7, kind of a crappy note. Excuse my language. A little it needs something. So the first thing you can do to make it sound better is to bend that note a little bit. So if you don't already do this, if this is not 100% in your playing, this is the first thing you want to get down. It's super rudimentary, but it does separate the people who can play well from the people who cannot. I'll play unadulterated B flats. But if I bend it a hair, now don't sell this short, guys. There I bent up a whole half step, now a quarter step. Right, so just always tweaking that flat third. So B flat, and here's a super secret, don't tell anyone, is I'm going to always keep the bend in motion. If I stop the bend, it's out of tune because I'm bending it like a quarter step, alluding to the half step, to the natural 3, excuse me. So I'm going to bend it a little bit, but I have to keep the bend moving because if I stop the bend, I get that, right? So let's hear that. Right? Which worse, the B flat or the quarter step? But if I keep the bend going and stop it, right, so I stopped that note or I went to a different note. So I'm going to go to this bend, the B flat, slight tweak to the G. Right? Okay, so now I'm going to go up to, I'm just going to stop the bend. So I stop that bend just with my pick, all right? Like, because then your ear kind of hears it in motion. It's sort of pulling it up to this B natural. And I know the classroom, the lesson today we're talking about arpeggios and dominant 7th chords. We'll get to that in a second because what we are alluding to is the dominant 7th chord without actually playing it. We're getting this really cool note because the blues is the only situation, generally speaking, that you can play a minor scale over a major chord. So this is a major chord. G7 is a major chord. And you get that flat third, which is a minor note, flat third. So if we're playing, like a... right? You can't, or, playing C minor pentatonic over a C major chord progression. Sounds horrendous. So the blues is really kind of interesting in that when you tweak that flat 3, it gives you this really cool sound because you are alluding to the natural third of the scale or of the chord. Is this making sense? So I'm thinking about, and that gives it that kind of in-between sound. Now, if I want to fret that note, which is where we're going to go to next, well, actually, one more thing. The other note we can tweak, which is super important, is your flatted 7th, and that would be the F. Yeah, you could sit on a flat 7. That sounds great. That took a little time to get used to my ear. Like when I was younger, I always wanted to hear it resolve, right? But I don't think you don't need to. But and you want to practice the length of the time it takes you to get the bend going. Here's my flat 7 bend. To root, flat 3, flat 3, 3, sorry. Flat 7, root, flat 3, tweak. Without tweaking. Tweaking. Kind of like day and night, right? I mean, one sounds good and the other does not. That's the way I kind of look at it. So this all making sense, everybody? Good? Okay. So the first thing I'm thinking about is that. How can I get those notes just right? And like I said, if you go to a jam or if you're not, I have to hear somebody play this. I don't care what somebody's technique is like, in terms of shreddy stuff or how fast they can play or anything. If they don't have these subtle things down, I don't really want to usually listen to them as a player. So someone can be very intermediate, and there's nothing wrong with being intermediate, of course, but you will always sound better if you do these two things. You're going to tweak your flat 3 and tweak your flat 7. Okay, so G7 is spelled G, B, D, F. So the only thing we want to think about that's not on our pentatonic scale, G pentatonic is G minor pentatonic is G, B flat, C, D, F, G, B flat, C, D, F, right? So the B of my G7 scale, G7 chord, excuse me, G, B, D, F is missing. So you got to add it in. I'm always going to enter from a half step below. So I'm going to play B flat to B. So I have this sound. Right? That's cool, right? Really bright. As opposed to the tweak. Fretted. Now, what if I bend that half step to B flat to the B? It's a cool sound. So we come up with this kind of cool scale. And this is what we'll talk about in my workshop this weekend coming up. I'm going to expand upon these ideas. And this is just the first thing we can do, which is really hip. But it's a great sound to simply take your minor blues scale, minor pentatonic scale, add in a natural third. The trick is going to be adding in the flat 3 to the natural 3. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to go down the scale. I'm going to play B flat to B. Then going down a scale. So it's B flat to B, G, F, D, C, B flat, B, G, F, D, C, B flat, B, G. So I get this. Pretty sweet. Now if I go up, it's just going to be flat 3 to 3. So. So once again, going up, ascending is going to be G, B flat, B, C, D, F, G, B flat, B, C, D, F, G, B flat, B. Descending is going to be B flat, B, G, right? Because we're really favoring that flat 3, as opposed to going. It could be pretty okay as a passing, but it doesn't have the same sound, right? I'll play it over the track. So, as opposed to, right? But of course it works, but that's much more common. Your flat 3 to your natural 3. So all I'm doing, taking a G minor pentatonic scale and adding in a natural 3. And I'm going to approach it from a half step below each time. It's going to noodle. That's it. So that's all I'm doing on that G7 chord. I'm thinking G minor pentatonic with an added natural 3. Why does this work? Well, G minor pentatonic is, let's talk about the numbers. It's root, flat 3, 4, 5, and flat 7. A dominant 7th chord is root 3, 5, flat 7. So the pentatonic scale has an added 4th, which sounds really cool. Gives us this dominant, right, with that dominant 7, sus4. Doesn't matter, sounds good, right? It's got a name, doesn't so much matter. But it does have a flat 3, the scale is a flat 3, so we add in a natural 3 and we get this really cool thing happening. And as my good friend Keith right there said, approach notes, right? So yes, my knees hurt. Approaching the half step below gives us chromatic run from second, flat 3 to 3. Not so much from the second yet, because we didn't do that. We can talk more about that in the workshop. So we have this flat 3, 3 to 4. So we get that cool beginning of adding chromaticism into your playing. And that's what this workshop, I sound like Tony Robbins, that's what this workshop. But yeah, there's so much stuff to talk about. And that's one of the things I want to cover and talk about it. But the main thing is, if you see the pentatonic scale, the minor 1 to begin with, and then you see where your chord tones are of your G7 chord, G, B, D, F, and how they apply inside your minor pentatonic scale very simply by adding in a natural 3, you start to outline the chords in a more flavorful way. You're not just letting your fingers do the playing, you're actually working through ideas, right? And consciously outlining the sound of the chord. If you haven't done that before, your playing will take a big leap forward. I know mine did when I first started getting into that. I remember first hearing B.B. King, and when I was younger, going, well, he sounds a lot different than, say, my first blues influences were maybe like Stevie, like a lot of people, or the British guys. Peter Green played a lot. I was akin to Peter Green later, but I listened to a lot of Clapton, and he does a little bit of that, for sure, but not as much as, say, Peter Green did or B.B. King. If we're going to go for that sort of kind of playing in making generalities. But Clapton does a lot. And say, I think a Sleepy Time was a big one for me. Like, he does that intro. He's hitting that natural 3. Right, on a C minor pentatonic scale. So I'm just adding that in, and then suddenly you've got a whole other sound going on, right? It's not just the typical minor pentatonic licks. Not that there's anything wrong with those. Let's hit the neck, right? So that's the first thing I'm going to think about. So we'll check out learning how to add in more chromaticism to the playing, mixing arpeggios that are diatonic to the key, working on some specific triads that sound really great over a dominant blues. But the main thing is if we learn how to play well over a 1 dominant 7th chord, in this case G7, when a blues is made up of 3 dominant 7th chords, right? So all those ideas can be, boom, go right over here. And you can use them on C7, right? And then you can work it out again and work it on, say, the 5 chord and a G blues and use it on D7. So all these chords, this concept can cover all 3 of your chords by just modifying a pentatonic scale. So that's just the first step of some of the stuff we'll talk about. It's easy to expand on some of these ideas because it's all pentatonic based. Just think about pentatonic as home base, kind of focusing on some of these ideas, and then by changing 1 note or 2 notes, you start covering all the chord changes and getting those more advanced sounds or harmonically deep sounds, whatever you want to call it. It's still all inside. There's no out stuff going on, no diminished or altered or anything like that. You're getting really into outlining the changes, which is the most important thing you want to do before you even try to do something more difficult, like I said, like playing some diminished stuff or superimposing things. But that's the framework. I think about this all the time. So there's no level like, oh, this is beginning, this is easy. That's the way I think about stuff. It's the way I use it, and that's the way I know most guitar players do that. I mean, you can think just even, what I did there is you could play that arpeggio. You played a G7 arpeggio. Came down a blues lick. So you can start to think about ways that you can put these things together into ideas. There's the idea of like practicing melodic cells. Sometimes they call it that in jazz, like these ideas. So you just practice this little idea, maybe move into a few different keys, but you practice, okay, I'm going to ascend an arpeggio, descend a scale. And you just start to get those things under your fingers. And these little small ideas become bigger ideas. You just start to spread them out. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to cover this in a lot more. I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the stuff, how the master classes go. And that is going to be on Sunday the 25th at 1 p.m. Hopefully I haven't given too much away. I just wanted to share with you guys some of the stuff we're going to do. I got a lot of loyal guys. Also, it's how I make my living. So if you like what I do here and you like the free content and all that, please just take a master class, and that allows me to continue to do the free content here and supports what it is that I do. And that's where that end of it is where I make my living. Contrary to popular belief, this end is not where you make your living. So I think Keith is leaving. Keith has to upload his new video, and we're going to bid a fond farewell to Keith as he leaves. I spoke to him earlier. All right, see you, Keith. So any questions, guys, on this? Anything you want to talk about? Just wanted to get started on this and get digging in on some of it. And you smashed the like button. Thank you for smashing the like button. That's always great. I'm going to drink some kombucha. I don't know if it's actually good for you. I just kind of like it. My wife thinks I'm insane for drinking it because she hates it, but I like it. All right. So vamp-wise, I'm using a looper. Always get a looper, guys. This is one of my favorite ways to practice guitar. The looper... Well, let's talk about the practical aspects of looping, or having a looper, is I can practice anything I want at any time. I don't have to go looking on YouTube for backing tracks or searching through all your backing tracks trying to find just the right thing. Or you want to practice a one-chord bluesy vamp, and you're thinking, where do I look for a one-chord bluesy vamp? So the main thing, you just work on your looper. So what I did with the looper here... Now, here's the trick about looping. Play your groove first and hitting the downbeat. And loop. Now the end of the loop becomes the beginning of your first beat. So let me show you what I mean. So if I'm doing a 4-bar loop, let's try the 2 bars. Bum, bum, ba-da-dum. So bum, bum, ba-dum, bum. Yeah, like 4. Bum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-dum. So start the loop. Dum, ba-boom, boom, bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, bum. So I step on the loop on beat 1. When I first started looping, I thought I would try to step on the loop right here at the very end of the phrase. So you're what you're actually doing is you're re-recording your first downbeat. So the last thing you played was actually turns out to be the first part of the loop. So you kind of loop around and go to the front of it. Takes some practice, but one of the real tricks about looping is that you play the groove first. Let me try something totally different. So like try something like I got it, right? So there it is, start over again, right? See, what starts to happen is if you're not really careful with it, you can do like a start loop. And then you get this, right? Where your loop is off by a 16th note or something. And then you're trying to play over it, and then everything goes out the window because the time of the loop is bad. So what I did was, what I say about the looping, excuse me, whenever I have an idea like wanting to work on a dominant 7th chord, I just choose the dominant 7th chord and I can play over a looper. I don't have to go looking for background tracks or anything like that. Other just general tips that I'm actually using right now, my Fractal FM3. I particularly like practicing with this unit, say more than the amplifiers, is because it's got a looper built in with all the effects and everything. So it's so easy, and it's a really nice looper in here. And I think everybody should get a looper if you don't have one. And also, leave it plugged in all the time. Make it a part of your pedal board or just right outside of your pedal board. And so the other quick thing too is put the looper at the end of the chain. Like, because if you want to put distortion on a looper, I think of it as a tape recorder, right? So you're recording everything you've played through your pedals, and then the loop repeats it. Excuse me, kombucha. If I put the looper over here, right? It's going to be, if I have my distortion over here, the loop in front of the overdrive is you're going to be repeating the overdrive. And you start soloing, it's going to sound all messy and ugly. So when you put the looper after everything, delay, reverb, and everything, it repeats what you had recorded into the looper. So that's definitely the way to do it. You could have the looper in between reverb and delay if you want. There's a bunch of ways. Primarily after distortion. That's the big thing. The looper, if you put it before reverb and then or after reverb and then you do the loop, sometimes the reverb might get a little off cut and weird. I don't so much care about that because I'm not using it live in a real gigging situation. I'm just using it at home to practice. So it works really, really great. Somebody talked about using a drum machine. Yeah, drum machines are awesome. I practice with drum machines all the time. One of the problems I find with the drum machine is I sometimes have to find the beat that I want at that moment. So anything that's going to slow me down from actually practicing, I try to jettison quickly because I don't know about you guys. I mean, if I get distracted, it's like, oh, cows, and I'll just start messing with pedals or, the tone's not just right. And then you just don't end up practicing because you're psychologically, you're putting a barrier between you and your practice. Right? That's what it is. Come on, let's be honest. It just comes down to practicing is hard. It takes concentration and work. And then sometimes it's easier to get distracted by gear and pedals and things. And then you go, oh, I didn't really practice and I never got any better. But boy, I spent an hour dialing in an overdrive. And I can speak from lots of experience. So one of the things, like I said, when I often practice too, I will just play into a clean patch on my Fractal with the looper. Or if I have the looper set up on my pedal board, I'll just run clean into the amp and just go with that. And I just try to avoid anything that's going to distract me from the task at hand, which in this case would be um, would be just working on this one idea. You know, like I'm going to take one idea, dominant 7 chord, I'm going to vamp that, and I'm going to take a minor pentatonic scale and add on a flat 3 to natural 3. That's your work. That's your homework. That's what you want to work on. And then you just start looping that, and then that's all you work on. Because if you try to do it on a jam track, the jam track could have a different tempo that you like, a feel that you don't like. Also, I don't know about you guys, but have you ever noticed you've got almost like your internal default tempo, right? If somebody says, "Yeah, just play something," you just start playing. Mine is about here, which I guess about 110 or something like that. I just start playing everything at that tempo unless I consciously go, "All right, play something slow." So there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Sometimes when you want to practice something, you do want to practice things at different tempos to get used to playing over slow stuff and fast things, of course. But once again, my point about the looper is that it keeps you quickly in the game of practicing and not easily distracted by all the other things that are so easy to distract us. And like I said, people are saying, Matt Gibson, yep, very guilty of that. We all are because, like I said, it's a psychological thing. Here's my take on it, because I know this to be true. It's just a fear of failure, right? You know, it's easier to not work on the stuff because then you don't have to feel that you didn't achieve the goal that you wanted to. It's just really what it comes down to. I don't think any musician I know feels any differently about this stuff. Maybe one or two. I don't know, but I've got the good fortune of being friends with some of my favorite guitar players growing up, and you just think that these guys have attitudes of steel and tons of confidence and things. And yeah, I'm pretty confident in my abilities in the realm in which I feel comfortable, and I like stretching out. But when you hear guys like that voice insecurities themselves, the same exact stuff that you feel, the same stuff that I feel, the same stuff that everybody feels, the same stuff that I feel when I'm doing something that's not guitar related, that's new. So, but even guitar, I have to really carve out a time to practice. I put in my schedule. Let's talk about that. I'm all over the place, but this is what's been helping me. My son went back to school, so I'm getting back up early. I have a tendency to be a late night person, but as a result of that, because of the freaking internet, what I used to stay up late and practicing and writing songs, I end up like watching YouTube or something, thinking I'm doing something cool by watching a Mike Landau concert or Peter Green thing or Wes Montgomery. And then you sometimes think, or watching an idiot like me talk about stuff. I'm practicing, kind of, because I'm watching this guy. So it's this weirdo thing that we all deal with, that through watching this stuff, which is often like infotainment, that will make us somehow better. It doesn't. So the first, basically, besides taking my master class this Sunday, you just get the idea. Okay, turn everything off, turn off your phone, get your looper going, and work on something. So back to this point, so my son, make sure I get him off to school, and it's like 7:30. So now I've just been staying up. I know I'm fortunate my day doesn't, I film videos and teach, so my day starts later in the day. So the back end of my night is bad. So here's what I would usually do. Before I had some sort of scheduled thing, I would get up later because I could, but I work late, and then your day is shot, and then the rest of the world is moving. So I have the good fortune of that. So now I can get up in the morning and practice. And I'm just forcing myself to do it. So like an hour a day. And just the difference in the very short period of time is great. And I just try to put aside all the nonsense, and I pull out a tune or something that I really want to work on. And my goal is just, it's going to get something new under my finger today. One little thing. Doesn't matter what it is. I see one of my students and friend here, Michael Cope, is online. And we're working on, sometimes I will be working on something, and then I'll just share it with the students. Say, this is what I'm working on. Check this out. And it spurs on this nice conversation about how music works, and then gives him and other students something to practice. And then after that, I try to exercise, because I really need to do that. That's more difficult than practicing for me, because I've never been big into that. So I'm working on that. Okay. You got any questions? You got some questions coming in. So first, I want to say hi to everybody. David Dare Parker. I'm glad to hear you are feeling better, man. Good to see. Oh, all my Australian friends. Matt Schofield will be performing in Australia. So go over to Matt's website. Got to go see him play. I've got a few of my other students from Australia going to check him out. So if you're not aware that Matt will be coming to Australia next month. November. In November. So yeah, pick up some tickets. If you got to go see him play. He's just freaking amazing. And he's a great dude. So definitely. Okay. Yeah, exercise. What? All right. So thanks to BV for being here as always and doing all this for me. I really appreciate it. He's the best. And I can't thank him enough. And Steve Moore is here. Matt Gibson, like I said. Kirk Schaffenberg. So guests just shut up and play guitar. Probably like what I should do right now. But yes. Yeah. Just saying hi to everyone as we're going through it. Stan Samos, of course. Kevin, Richard and Sarah. Michael Borrell, as always. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, the guys. Keith left, so we can talk about him. Michael Gilberto. Dan Lee, or Lai. Carlos Delgado, Baby John, all the guys. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Appreciate it. So let me get some questions. This is from Michael. If you write a solo, how do you get it installed or by whom? Greetings from Mike and Jeremy. If you write a solo, how do you get it installed or by whom? I'm not sure what you mean, Michael. If you could rephrase it, I'm a little confused as to what you mean by that. Maybe I'm being a little thick. Okay. This is from Cork Moyer. Do you usually have an internal dialogue when soloing, or how much of this is under your fingers with minimal thought? Okay, that's a great question. All of the above. So it's like anything. Think about this. I love my friend Chris, who talked about what we do. Guys, say like myself, who can play a number of different styles because I had to learn how to make a living as plumbers. He's like, sometimes we're just good plumbers, right? You get called for a gig and you're a good plumber on that gig. You're the right guy. You can cover a lot of ground, you know how to fix stuff, and that's why you get called. So the internal dialogue when I'm practicing something is I will have finally learned to a large extent is to forget about everything except one simple idea and just work on that first. So if I'm working through playing on a blues like this, as I said, or one chord, my one goal right now would be consciously map out where that flat 3 and natural 3 is across the fingerboard. Just work on that. And if I have to think about it, like, okay, B flat, B, B flat, B, G, B flat, B, G, F, D, C, B flat, B. Like, now, I don't think about that when I'm playing, right? I don't go B flat, B, you know, nobody does because that's crazy. That won't work. I do also hear the degree of the scale. So if I play this and I play the F, which is a flat 7, I hear that as a flat 7 and I think about it as that too. So some people ask me like, what do you mean? Like, oh, do you think about the notes or do you think about the scale tone? Like, is it a flat 7? And when I first started, it was most definitely the note names. And then I had to go back and start to hear things as root 3, 5s, and flat 7s. Ultimately, I wish I had kind of learned the other way around because it's the pitch and the sound of the pitch that's the most important. So when I'm soloing like this, I will target the idea that I want to get, and then I would just practice the heck out of it and try it again, different keys, different positions. And then eventually it starts to go under your fingers and you develop the sound. So it's what I was saying about the plumber is what I do through years of practice and experience may seem as when I was younger, kind of like magical, like, oh my, not thinking about, you understand what I'm saying? Like, wow, how does he do that? Just like when I have somebody who came, you know, who would work on my computer and sort this stuff out and be like, you know, and you're like, oh, fuck, how does he do that? Because he just has done it his whole life. So that's what I'm getting at. It's like just through the practice of the small ideas over and over again, that it all starts to open up in front of you if you do the work. So at first it's very conscientious. I'm going to practice a specific idea, work out ideas around it, keep on running through it, beat the heck out of it, really, really try to use it. And then eventually it just starts to find its way into your playing. Hopefully that answers your question. So it's a bit of all that, you know? Okay. Um, that's my internal dialogue. My internal dialogue when I'm soloing on a gig. Okay, well, first of all, it's just the song. If it's something, if it's a song like that, I really need to know what's going on. If there's some changes, I will have practiced it before the gig, so I don't feel like so I feel like I can play my best on it. If I am reading chord changes, if we're talking about something that's tough, here, Mr. Softy. You guys hear that? I'm just gonna get some ice cream. I'll be right back. Okay, so it's and some end of summer coming up. All right, so on a blues, okay, let's say if we're talking about something I'm really comfortable with, like a blues, I'm not thinking about making the chord changes that much because I've internalized it and I've practiced a lot. But at one point, I was thinking, okay, here comes my 4 chord. I'm going to target these notes. I'm going to target the 1 chord. I'm going to focus in on those ideas. If, say, for instance, I use an example when I toured with Robin, he had a lot of tunes. I had to learn all of his tunes. And he did this to me a number of times, and it's totally cool. It's great. We had rehearsal. He would say, I'll take these tunes, you take those tunes. And then, of course, inevitably, on the first gig, he would point to me to solo on the song that he was supposed to solo on. So the last thing I wanted to do was be caught with my pants down and not having known how to solo over this particular tune or those changes. So that I will practice the material ahead of time, become very familiar with it, try to go inside it, and try to get the little things that I can do. So if there's a tune I know well, if there's a lot of chord changes, I'm sometimes thinking about the changes. If I know the song really well, then manual override takes over. So it's preparation, really. So the more prepared I am, the more free and musical I can be. The less prepared I am, or if something is just thrown at me, the more safe I will be. And then the experience I have, hopefully from doing a lot of these things before, will not paint me too much into a corner. Sometimes if something is just too freaking hard for me, like just music I don't play, I will just gracefully bow out. Like if somebody says, hey man, let's do a bebop gig. No way. I can play over changes, but I can't play jazz. I'm not a jazz guitar player. So, all right, that was a long answer, but okay. Hope he comes to Perth. I don't know. I think he's in all the big towns. Just joined. What's covered in the masterclass? Largely what we're talking about right now. So Matt, you got some tickets to see Matt. Awesome. Okay. What percentage of luck is involved in Robin's career success? Oh, not a lot of luck. I mean, everybody's got a certain degree of luck in their career, and anybody who says they don't, I think is sort of lying. But it's luck that you create through really hard work. Does that make sense? You know what I mean. Nobody found him in his living room, yet he had some lucky breaks that people were at the right place. So he put himself in the right position that the right people would see him. And so he was lucky that George Harrison, that he got recommended for that gig. So was it luck? A little, because he met the right people, but it's because he was such a badass and he was always around really good players and put himself out there that the luck, that some certain lucky things happen. So is it luck? Is it not? It's not like winning the lottery. Like that's not the case. So in any musician success that I know, there's no such, the overnight success in 10 years in the making or 20 years in the making. Robin was out there gigging since he was in high school professionally, and then just paid his dues. Never let up, kept on doing it. That doesn't guarantee success, as we know plenty of musicians who never made it, that we love, or have a very hard time making a living. But he just put himself out there. He was always out there. So that would be my answer. A certain degree of luck, and he would say that lucky that Miles Davis called him as opposed to somebody else. But was it luck that Miles Davis knew who he was or called him? Or that he was good enough to play with Miles? No. Okay. I am a dad, so I sound like a dad. He's such an amazing musician. It's so hard to say. I guess my knees hurt. I've been playing for so many years. Only recently I can hear notes, not thirds or fifths, just matching a note, using my piano and keyboard, and find my notes in guitar. Yes, slow progress. It does, progress, as long as it's progress. And you can start trying to hear what pitches sound like. Play a C chord on your piano or guitar. and play the third, which should be E. You know? Right? So that, I just start to go, okay, that's third, keep on playing it. Some of them are really kind of obvious to me. Certain ones sound more obvious. Thirds sound obvious, or sevens, flat sevens. That to me is I can hear those really clearly. But I've practiced them. Plumber and artist is not the same. I would disagree on certain things. Most of my work, certainly you're required to be an artist. But a lot of the work that I've done professionally, playing in somebody's band, they like what I do, but a lot of it is just knowing how to do the job properly. And there's some artistry to that at times, but sometimes it's like, here, just play what's on the record. I want you to play exactly what's here. So to me, that's kind of like a really good plumber or a really good electrician, where you could go in and do the job and do a great job and nail it and do it perfectly. Like, they didn't want a whole new rebuilding of the bathroom. They just wanted you to fix that and make that better. So that's a lot of times gigs can be very much like that. I want you to play exactly what's on the record. I have a number of friends who do Broadway. You just play what's on that chart. If you don't play what's on that chart, you're out. So is that artistry, or is that, they don't have a lot of room for artistry for that. So I would push back on that a little bit. But if you're talking about me getting hired because they like the way I solo, that's a different thing. Yeah, that's an artistry thing. Wouldn't having a DAW with a backing track and then record your solos, you can hear them back, would be a good way to go? Yeah, of course. Okay, so I'm just talking about jumping in to practicing, right? Loop going, I got to just start practicing, I want to get something going. Always record yourself and listen back. The great thing is you don't have to go into a DAW. If you just have your looper, turn on your phone, or if you have a computer, just turn on anything that can record you both either visibly and audibly, or just audibly, and listen back. Like, my computer's set up with all the stuff, 'cause I do all the online stuff. I just have I've got a fancy camera I'm using for you guys right now, but I have a webcam, and I can just press record on the webcam. All my audio is routed into that, so I can listen to something back and make a decision. Once again, something like the DAW and the backing track can get in your way of practicing, because it's stuff you got to set up. If you want to record a solo because you practiced and you want to record the solo, I highly recommend that. You always want to hear what you sound like back. Sometimes you're very surprised at how good you sound, and the other times you're more often than not really miserable at how bad you think you sound. But yes, so there you go. Hey, Vertex here. What's up, guys? Is that you, Mason? What's going on, Mason? Thank you for the kind word. Great teacher. Wish I had this available to me when I first picked up the guitar. Thanks, Mason. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. My pedal board's over there. Vertex Boost. Greatest boost on the planet. Okay. All right. Where do you find inspirations for writing your solos? Okay, thank you. Okay, Michael, you're back. Thanks for that. That clears up. I find inspiration sometimes hard to come by. Or if we're talking about writing songs, let's talk about that. And now I'll get to the solos. Like all of us, it's hard because you need to make a living, and finding time to write material, that takes a lot of time, and time where it's difficult to that time that I need to make a living. So I'm fortunate that what I do is generally a creative job, thank God, but for years and years of putting my time into it. But in terms of writing songs, I find, if we're talking about that, I know it's not exactly what you asked, I need to have a project in mind. Like, I hadn't written songs for a while, and then Robin asked to do a record with me, and so that was the catalyst to write a few new tunes. Not as many as I wanted to, because it was a very short window that we had to do it, so I didn't write as many good tunes as I wanted. We kicked out a few because they just weren't good enough, and I appreciated that, So when it comes to inspirations for a solo, I really often take the David Gilmour approach, and also having nice conversations with Tim Pierce, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, who's just a ridiculous guitar player, is I'll play over the idea of the song a million times. All right, so I just get so into it that I know the chord changes. I think about, like, how can I be creative in it? So the inspiration will come from trying to find something different to play, not your standard stuff. Also, I will dig really deep into the song and try to figure out what I can do. On my record with Robin, he wrote a bunch of crazy changes in the tune 1968, and I had to solo over it, and it really was just. He's like, well, in the studio, I tried to improvise a solo, and it was kind of disastrous because it changed keys all over the place, and it just was way out of my wheelhouse. So I went home, practiced over that a million times, and then came up with some ideas. So part of that solo was composed. There's nothing wrong with composing solos. Let's talk about that for a sec. David Gilmour writes the solos. He composes them because they're compositions. Usually when you hear somebody rip a fast line, it's a really cool thing. It's a composed line that they might have not, that they wrote for the song, or they've written it somewhere else and they put it together in there. There are these moments of inspiration where someone just lay down a solo, third take, and it's just perfect. It's great because that's because you have the years of experience. But one thing I want to stress is some of the greatest guitar solos of all time are not improvised. They are written. Like this, Eddie Van Halen, people said like, oh, he had improvised his solos. And then you listen to live versions of the songs recorded prior to the first record, he's playing the same guitar solo. That's not a takeaway from Eddie Van Halen. I mean, that's just crazy to think anything negative about that guy. But my point is, even these greatest guitar solos were things that people worked on because they were going to live forever, right? Someone like Robin, we're going to talk about him a fair amount, improvises on the records. He might take one or two shots, or he might punch in the second half of the solo because I didn't really like the ending of that. And I'm like, well, I should be so unfortunate to play that second half of that solo. Okay, so I just keep on playing over and over the song, get totally familiar with it. And if I like an idea that I want to use, I will record the solo, write it down, or maybe piece together a solo I really like if it needs to be composed. And then oftentimes, if it's something that leaves room for improvisation, I might craft a part of the solo and improvise on the other part of the solo. So is it improvised? Well, I've practiced over it before, so I'm going to probably end up playing some ideas that I might have played before. Okay, so don't you love these long answers? Hopefully it answers. Okay, Kirk Moore, I'm relieved. On the fly, normally I think one transition through changes or one target note if I'm flying by the seat of my pants. The rest is just instinctual. Thanks for your insight. You're welcome, and that's exactly the way I think about it too. Jazz those enclosures. Yes, I know. All right, thanks, Dan. Glad you agree. Robin just played there in San Francisco. Robin is a beast. He is a beast. Check out those live concerts from Helsinki that he just posted on his page. I just gave him a text and was like, man, I don't know why you're playing so good. He always plays so good. But he's playing the one with the PRS, which is great. But he plays the one with the Telly, which might have been the second set or something. And man, there's just some of the stuff that he does there is just crazy. Okay. Joe Robinson played with him here in San Francisco. Oh, he released a video about it. Great breakthrough for Joe to share their stage with Robin. They've actually done some playing together before. And Joe lived in Nashville, and Robin lived in Nashville, so Joe's ridiculous. Good to BV, get good enough to people notice. Got to have put the work in to be able to take advantage of the lucky break. Yeah, got to be a good hang too. Right, that's the most important thing. You got to be a good dude. If you're a jerk, nobody wants to hang out with you. You won't get called for gigs because they just think you're. So first of all, what was it? Keith who left. Keith was talking about. Neil Gaiman was talking about like 3 things in the freelance world. Like, you got to have these 2 of the 3 things. It's almost like you want it cheap, fast, or good. That same kind of thing. You want it on time, really good, or really creative. Same kind of idea. If you want it really fast, I'll be on time. I can get it done really fast. It might not be the most creative thing you've wanted or something. But what I would say is some of the success that I've had. Let's talk about just even the limited success compared to my friends like Rick Beato and Keith of how many people are here. It's because I'm doing this all the time. I don't do it as much as I should, but it's the consistency of putting yourself in front of people and being there and hopefully doing a good job that people start to pay attention. Exactly like BV was saying. Yeah. But Robin can back it up. Yeah, at the end of the day, you got to be able to back it up. But at really the end of the day, you got to be cool. If somebody can't hang with you, then it'll never happen. This is Joe Pickup. When I record myself, I start poorly. Then it sounds great. Then it starts doing things. I play too fast and it sucks again, but it's still fun. Yeah, that's all part of it. You go up and down on these things, and that's the whole point of the improv. And you're messing around with it. Then you start to work through what worked and what didn't work. But yeah, absolutely. Some days I think I'm playing great, and other days I think I'm playing terribly. Steely Dan, a lot of solos, a lot of improvised solos. Yes, and a lot of them were improvised in the studio, so they had to get them done in a period of time. So that's that interesting thing too. Like, okay, you got it. They were that famous thing. I think it was Peg, was it, that everybody had to crack at that solo? Was it Peg? I can't remember. Or was it Kid Charlemagne? One of those ones. I don't remember. And yeah, take a stab at it and see what you come up with. And all these guys. Sometimes it took a few hours. So there's those moments of absolute inspiration that you called the right guy for the right gig, or they just happened to get into that tune and just killed it. Or there's the times where these changes are really, really difficult, and you have something like Kid Charlemagne, like Larry Carlton taking that great solo. It's obviously some kind of stuff he kind of worked on before. To be able to lay down something that magical is a lot of badassery behind that. Okay. Yeah, like we were talking about the hello solo of Lionel Richie. Yeah, all these great guitar solos are most often composed. So you watch the Helsinki show with the PRS, Susan Maestro. Yeah, absolutely. He sounds great on the PRS. I think there was this. I think the Telly show. I think it was the same night, or I can't tell, but later that night, and just a little more warmed up, a little more into it, and he loves his Telly. Like it's like putting on your favorite pair of jeans or something like that. Elliot Randall on Reelin' in the Years. Yeah, my brother was asking me earlier today. He was listening. He's like, "Who's that on guitar?" It's Elliot Randall. Okay. I got a lot of people here. Any questions? Like I said, once again, as BV's posting, I do have my masterclass coming up this Sunday on. It's a live Zoom masterclass. If you cannot catch it on the initial broadcast, it doesn't matter. You can watch it anytime you want afterwards, after you enroll. You hit the link over there. It's 25% off. And I talk about, as I talked about in the beginning here, starting to outline the chord changes, but adding some more spice to your playing very simply. All of it's going to be inside, like no outside stuff yet, because if you have to master the inside stuff to be able to play outside. And we're going to talk about just playing over one chord, in this case maybe like a G7, and a number of things that you can do to spice that up. And of course, that works if you have any kind of one chord vamp. And I mean, of course, you're playing blues, you have 3 dominant 7 chords, so you can apply those ideas to everything. So that is over at JM Guitar Lessons, a link on the side. Yeah. I hope you guys join me. Like I've said, it is the way I make my living. If you love this content, you can, it's a great way of getting something in and helping me out, making a living doing this stuff. Thanks. Okay, what arpeggios do you help to use outside? Well, let's inside first. Well, here's the thing. Anything can sound outside as long as you resolve it. How's that for an answer? That's a whole other hours and hours of work. But there's plenty of great videos on talking about playing out. But just resolving anything that you do and using your ears. The out stuff, I found there's all sorts of things that you can use to play out. But it eventually all comes down to just resolving to chord tones. Yeah. So, thanks, David. Man, mate, I love your True Fire courses. Thanks. And like I said, David, go over to Jam Guitar Lessons. Sign up over there. We got some free stuff. Working on a free mini course for the channel over there as well. Okay. So, I appreciate everybody being here. I hope everybody has a good weekend, and hopefully I'll see you Sunday. Go over to Jam Guitar Lessons and sign up for the workshop. Thanks to BV for just doing all this stuff for me. And hopefully some days I will get to meet him in person. I'm not ready for your masterclass. I'm still on your Arpeggios True Fire class. Okay, that's a good point. So I have an arpeggio class course at True Fire. And I do very much like that course. What I've learned from many of my True Fire courses, and I'm very proud of all of them, is sometimes there's just way too much information, because that's the way these courses are designed. So I'm not trying to get your money this would do you well, because the True Fire course, though, talks about the arpeggios, and I think it's a really good course. This actually simplifies it even more to make it in a way you can start to use it. I think very often people with the True Fire courses, they're on to the next one, they feel like they got to learn all these things, and then they get worn down on some of them. So it's a real struggle for myself and a lot of the guys who put out courses to make sure you pace these things so people don't feel like they're completely overwhelmed, and it's just too much. So like I said, I like that course, but I think the angle that I take on this really helps to fine-tune some of that stuff and to make it more useful. Okay. So thanks to everybody. And, here's BB. If people record their practice more, then improvement gets better quicker. Yep. People's thoughts on practice in real time usually isn't what they think it is, and their ears is non-recorded misleads them. Absolutely. And as a recording the guy who owns the studio, you hear that all the time. People are like, oh, it's terrible. And you play it back and you're like, oh, yeah, actually, that was pretty good. Or vice versa. Usually the first part, the former, you know what I mean? And thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. You were one of the best at True Fire, period. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. And like I said, if you can't make it live with me on Sunday, it doesn't matter. You can watch it anytime you want. Same information. All right, everybody. Have a great week. Or 2 weeks. I'll probably see you in 2 weeks. Got a few cool videos coming out. I got a bunch of things I'm recording. I got a new course I'm working on with Brett Papa on hard rock. Yeah. And then, you hear Bo in the background? Who let the dogs out? Yeah. Any dog outside, he just starts going crazy. A few courses come out with Brett. A few little master classes I'm going to do with Brett Papa. More stuff on jam guitar lessons. So if you haven't signed up over there, just sign up and you get some info. And I'm working on the free short blues course over at Jam Guitar Lessons and all that. So thanks again, everyone, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.